She was just 29, locked behind bars in Georgia's Fulton Correctional. But somehow, she seduced 6 correctional officers, infecting every one of them with HIV. Days later, she was found dead in her cell, face down, no signs of struggle and no explanation. The surveillance footage? Gone. The reports? Vanished. What really happened to Larissa Vaughn? Was it suicide, revenge, or murder sanctioned from above? Because in this prison, secrets don't stay locked up for long. And what she knew could burn the entire system to the ground. They called her Silk behind bars, not because of her voice or her walk, but because of how effortlessly she slipped through people's defenses. Larissa Vaughn wasn't the loud type, nor the kind to pick fights. She didn't belong in the typical chaos of Fulton Correctional Facility. At least that's what the guards whispered during rounds. She was too polished, too composed, too deliberate. Her crime said one thing, but her presence said another. Larissa had been in for nearly 5 years. On paper, she was just another inmate with a violent record. A 28-year-old woman serving time for stabbing her boyfriend during what the court had ruled as a drug-fueled domestic altercation. But those who met her rarely believed the narrative. She didn't look like someone who lost control. She looked like someone who calculated every move. Her cell was always spotless. Books stacked neatly by genre. Sheets folded with military precision. And when she walked the yard, she didn't engage in chatter. She studied people. Guards. Inmates. Visitors. Anyone who came within her orbit. She could read a man's soul in 10 seconds. One former CO would later say, "It was like she knew your weakness before you did." Larissa had a past few were willing to confront, and even fewer understood. Raised in Atlanta's Bowen Homes projects, she grew up watching her mother sell her body to feed 5 kids. At 13, Larissa was raped by one of her mother's clients. At 15, she ran away. By 16, she was back. This time, more dangerous, more intelligent, and wrapped in armor that didn't crack. She learned early that beauty could be weaponized, that silence could lure people in more effectively than noise. And most importantly, she learned that the people in power were often the easiest to manipulate. When she landed in Fulton Correctional, she didn't scream, didn't cry. She took her mugshot with the same expression she wore in court, serene, unreadable, and absolutely in control. For the first year, she kept to herself. She avoided conflict, followed the rules, earned a reputation as respectable. Officers started to trust her. One even started bringing her extra snacks. Another, Officer Malik Patterson, began walking her to medical alone. She never asked him to. She didn't have to. By year 2, it became clear Larissa was no longer just an inmate. She was becoming something else. Guards lingered a little longer by her cell. One, a married man named Jared Banks, had started showing up on her visitor list under the name Jordan Lee. He brought her scented lotions. She always returned them. Except one. Larissa was playing a game no one saw. A long con. A setup that required silence, timing, and the kind of patience only prison could teach. And somewhere between the commissary slips and the late-night cell checks, she discovered her greatest weapon, her diagnosis. Larissa Vaughn was HIV positive, and not newly either. Records would later show she was diagnosed 3 years prior, right before her incarceration. She never disclosed it to prison medical staff. She refused antiretroviral treatment. Inmates whispered that she practiced witchcraft. Others said she was just reckless. But they were all wrong. She was deliberate. She had access to 6 guards. All men, all seduced, one by one, and all of them believed they were the only one. It began subtly. Flirtations passed during meal shifts, slips of paper left under trays. Then came the private moments, empty laundry rooms, camera-free blind spots near the supply closet, and dark corners in the infirmary. What none of them knew was that Larissa was recording everything. A tiny pinhole camera hidden in a hair tie, audio saved on a smuggled MP3 player, a blackmail stash quietly building in a hidden panel behind her cell toilet. And still, no one suspected her, not even when Officer Patterson began missing days of work due to fatigue and night sweats. Not even when Jared Banks's wife left him after finding medication bottles in his glove compartment. The prison chalked it up to stress. Overwork. The usual, until Officer Nate Holloway collapsed during a routine check-in and was rushed to Grady Hospital. His diagnosis came fast and loud. HIV positive. Advanced stage. It didn't take long before the Department of Public Health connected the dots. Holloway, Banks, Patterson, Lewis, Robbins, Hunt. 6 names. 6 guards. All male. All infected. The prison went into panic mode. Internal affairs swept through Fulton like a hurricane. Every relationship, every recorded interaction, every shift rotation Larissa was almost put under a microscope. And suddenly, everyone remembered her. The silk-voiced woman with the perfect braids. The inmate who never got into fights. The one who always seemed to be watching. Who made men feel needed, respected, and desired. She had used the very architecture of the prison against itself. The blind corners. The lazy protocol. The lonely men. She seduced them not just with her body, but with attention, with softness in a place built on hardness. And they fell, one by one. Some of the guards denied everything. Others confessed in sobbing interviews. But by the time the warden approved Larissa's transfer to solitary for her own protection, the damage had been done. Outside media caught wind of the scandal. Headlines screamed, Georgia inmate infects multiple guards with HIV. Sex ring inside Fulton prison exposed. 6 guards, 1 prisoner. The infected truth. But the truth was even darker. Because Larissa knew exactly what she was doing. She had weaponized the one thing nobody could protect against. Intimacy. She had power. And in a system designed to strip women like her of identity, freedom, and autonomy, she had clawed it back with a vengeance. But power like that, especially when held by a black woman inside a crumbling prison system, comes at a cost. And as her story began to make national headlines, that cost would soon be collected. Because 4 days later, Larissa Vaughn was found dead in her solitary cell. No witnesses, no struggle, just silence, and a secret that didn't die with her. There's something about prison that distorts time and craving. The longer you're behind those walls, the louder loneliness gets. It whispers first, then it claws. And for the men who guarded Larissa Vaughn's cell, that whisper became a scream they couldn't silence. Not with authority, not with marriage vows, and not with a thin line between professionalism and temptation. Because Larissa knew something they didn't. She knew what it meant to be invisible, to walk past people and not be seen. She also knew the exact moment a man started seeing her. The longer she stayed inside Fulton Correctional, the more precise her seductions became. Not random, not reckless, intentional, surgical. It started with Officer Malik Patterson, a quiet man in his late 30s who never raised his voice and always said ma'am. A Gulf War vet with a strict Christian mother, and a wife who'd stopped texting him goodnight. On his 3rd year at the prison, he was emotionally hollowed out. That's who Larissa targeted first. She watched his routines, noted that he took extra time near the women's wing, that he liked jazz, that he wore his wedding ring only on Sundays. When he found a small folded note slipped under a food tray that said, "You walk like you still remember rhythm," he didn't report it. He responded. The next week, he extended her time in the library. The week after, she slipped him a drawing of saxophone with one word beneath it, play. By the 3rd month, they were meeting in the infirmary closet under the pretense of cleaning inventory. Surveillance in that wing was notoriously unreliable, something Larissa had confirmed after befriending a tech officer the previous year. What Malik thought was connection was just phase 1. Once Patterson was fully invested, emotionally compromised, Larissa moved on to Officer Jared Banks, the opposite of Patterson in every way. Loud, married with kids, and full of bravado. He was the type who flirted openly, threw his weight around, and thought no inmate could possibly manipulate him. But Larissa didn't use charm on Banks. She used fear. One day, she walked past him during yard duty and whispered, "Your son plays Pop Warner at Kendrick Park, right?" Then she smiled, not threatening, just knowing. That was enough. Within weeks, Banks was smuggling in makeup and cash. Within months, he was sneaking into the laundry room during night shift to spend 10-minute increments alone with her. She kept detailed records of it all. By the time guard number 3, Officer Nolan Hunt, entered her web, Larissa had learned how to adapt her persona to each target. For Patterson, she was a jazz soul poet trapped behind bars. For Banks, she was a dangerous queen who made him feel like a king. For Hunt, a rookie with a stutter and a hero complex, she became a wounded lamb. She feigned nightmares, panic attacks, shivering hands during inspection. Hunt, naive and soft-hearted, requested to be assigned to her block just so he could watch over her. It was absurd, but not questioned. No one suspected him. No one looked twice at her. Because that's what Fulton's system was built on: routine, assumptions, and shadows. And in the shadows, Larissa thrived. 3 guards turned into 4 into 6. Each one thought they were the only one. Each one shared secrets. Officer Banks told her the blind spots in camera rotation schedules. Officer Patterson whispered how to hide contraband under the shift lockers. Officer Hunt, he gave her access to the infirmary records. That's where the plan took shape. She began leaving signs. Fingerprints on plastic gloves. Smudged lipstick on collar seams. A bloody tissue folded into her book pages. Not because she was careless. Because she wanted them to know. She wanted to plant suspicion just deep enough to crack their loyalty. Just enough to make them sweat. At first, none of them suspected she was HIV positive. She kept her pills hidden. She told them she was clean. Some didn't ask. Some didn't care. All assumed they'd be fine. But in a place like Fulton, silence can kill. The other inmates saw it all unravel in real time. The way Larissa could summon Officer Patterson to her cell with a single knock. The way Banks looked at her like she was the last woman on earth. Some inmates hated her. Others admired her. But all of them knew Larissa wasn't playing survival. She was playing domination. I don't know what she said to them. One former inmate would later testify. But they were spellbound, like she had some kind of grip on their souls. These were men who used to bark orders at us. And now, they were bringing her hot meals and letters like schoolboys. What made it worse was that Larissa never gloated. She never raised her voice. She stayed quiet, elegant, terrifyingly calm. And that's what made it work. By the time Officer Nate Holloway collapsed in the break room, Fulton was already a crumbling castle. Whispers turned into reports. One correctional nurse noticed identical symptoms in 3 guards: fatigue, sores, rapid weight loss. When medical testing was finally mandated, the results detonated like a bomb. 6 male guards, all HIV positive, all with some form of contact with Larissa Vaughn. The administration scrambled to cover it up. Internal affairs descended. Relationships were exposed. Surveillance tapes were reviewed. But the worst damage couldn't be undone. The reputations, the marriages, the lives. Each guard gave a different version of their story. She told me she loved me. She said I was the only one who cared about her. She told me she didn't want to be alone. Only Officer Hunt cried during his testimony. She told me she'd kill herself if I left her. I thought I was helping. None of them could explain it. How they let their guard down. How they violated every rule, every code of conduct. How they risked everything for a woman they were supposed to protect society from. But Larissa wasn't a typical inmate. She was a mirror. She showed them what they wanted most and weaponized it. She made the system fall in love with her, then poisoned it from within. It began with a cough. Officer Nate Holloway had always been the picture of health. Military fit, sharp-minded. The kind of man who did 200 push-ups before breakfast and clocked into Fulton Correctional like a machine. But in late March, Holloway started missing shifts. First 1, then 2. He looked tired, pale, a shadow of the man who once barked orders with authority in the women's unit. When the prison nurse caught him vomiting behind the infirmary, she assumed it was the flu. But after running a standard panel and seeing his white blood cell count, she ordered an HIV test out of pure caution. She never expected it to come back positive. Holloway was stunned. He demanded a retest. When the second test confirmed it, Advanced HIV. He locked himself in his apartment for 3 days. Refused to speak. Refused to return to the prison. Word spread fast. Too fast. The staff's morale, already paper thin, began to unravel. Did you hear about Nate? I thought his wife cheated on him. No, man, wasn't his wife. He got it from inside. The rumors festered like rot. Quietly, then not so quietly. The phrase started being whispered between staff, between nurses, between wardens behind closed doors. It's her. It's Larissa. It only took one name to light the match. By April, 5 more guards had tested positive. All of them had worked the women's block. All of them had taken shifts involving Larissa Vaughn. Some had signed in for late-night rotations that didn't match the roster. Some had extended their stays without logging the hours. Their stories differed, but their lab results didn't. Jared Banks, the married father of 2, collapsed at his son's birthday party. Malik Patterson was hospitalized after a sudden pneumonia diagnosis. Officer Lewis admitted in private that he had a brief, intimate relationship with Larissa, but claimed it wasn't sexual. Officer Hunt, the youngest of the group, was so shaken he tried to resign before the internal investigation began. It was no longer just a health crisis. It was a scandal. The Georgia Department of Corrections launched a statewide investigation into Fulton Correctional. Media trucks parked outside. Headlines blared. Female inmate at center of HIV outbreak inside Georgia prison. Sexual misconduct and infection cover-up exposed in Fulton facility. 6 guards infected. All roads lead to one woman. Inside the walls of Fulton, fear spread faster than truth. Some inmates stopped using shared toilets. Others refused to eat food touched by officers. Guards wore gloves constantly. Whispers curled to the corridors. She's a witch. She gave it to them on purpose. She's cursed. But it wasn't witchcraft. It was calculation. By the time Larissa was questioned, she sat calmly in her solitary cell. No panic, no tears. She looked at the investigator like he was interrupting her peace. Ms. Vaughn, we have reports from multiple officers. I don't control what men do, she interrupted, her voice silky and even. Did you or did you not engage in sexual activity with staff? She smiled. I'm an inmate. That would be illegal. Isn't that your concern? When pressed further, she didn't flinch. They weren't infected when I got here, she said. Maybe you should look at their wives. Or each other. The investigator slammed his fist on the table. You're playing games with lives. Larissa leaned forward, meeting his stare without blinking. No, she said softly. They played with mine. The prison scrambled to explain how 6 guards violated security protocol so thoroughly, how they all overlooked signs, how none of them reported contact or incidents. Internal Affairs called it a breakdown in oversight, but that was just the surface. The real horror was this. Larissa had kept records, notes, names, exact dates, passwords, swipe-in logs copied down and hidden in a shampoo bottle, a hidden SD card wrapped in plastic, and buried beneath the floor tile in her cell. When investigators recovered it, they found video files, dozens of them, grainy, dark, but undeniable, faces of guards, voices, conversations, and more. She'd filmed everything. I told y'all I ain't crazy, one inmate muttered when news of the tapes broke. She was building a case or burning one down. For the state, it was a nightmare with no clean end. Fulton Correctional came under federal review. Several officers were suspended pending criminal investigation. The warden was reassigned, but none of it reversed what had already happened. 6 men, 6 lives, 6 careers, all infected. 1 inmate, 1 secret, 1 controlled detonation. What stunned officials even more was that Larissa had tested HIV positive nearly 3 years before the outbreak. She refused treatment, signed medical waivers, claimed religious beliefs. No one pressed further. No one thought she'd become a weapon. During one interview, Officer Hunt sobbed as he described how she had told him she loved him, how she cried in his arms after a guard hit her with a baton during inspection. She needed me, he wept. I thought I thought I could protect her. I didn't know I was killing myself. Others were less sympathetic. The public called it reverse assault, biological terrorism, murder in slow motion. But no charges were ever brought against Larissa. Why? Because every single act was technically consensual. Unethical, yes, but consensual. And no one could prove intent, not in the legal sense. Her refusal to treat HIV was protected by law. Her manipulation? Circumstantial. Still, she was moved into maximum solitary under the vague clause of institutional safety. She never spoke to another inmate again, but the damage echoed. Officer Patterson's wife filed for divorce. Officer Banks attempted suicide and survived. Officer Lewis was fired after assaulting another inmate during a shakedown. Officer Hunt disappeared from the public entirely. All 6 infected men were quietly offered state settlements, provided they signed NDAs. The story began to fade from the headlines. But inside Fulton, Larissa became a myth, a ghost, a warning. Inmates whispered her name like a spell. Guards referred to her only as V, as if naming her might bring her back. Then, for days after the last infected officer received his diagnosis, Larissa Vaughn was found dead, face down, in her cell, alone, no blood, no bruises, no note, just stillness. The official report ruled it a suicide. No signs of foul play. Cause of death, overdose. But those who knew Larissa didn't buy it. She wasn't done. One inmate said in a hushed voice. She had more names, more ammo. She wasn't finished with them. The tapes? Gone. The SD card submitted to Internal Affairs had gone missing in transfer. Her body was cremated within 48 hours. Her story, like most stories of women who fight back in silence, was buried deeper than her ashes. But the scars she left remained. 6 men infected, 1 system shattered, and 1 question left behind that no report could answer. Was it vengeance or justice? The prison was unusually quiet that morning. No shouting from the yards, no clanging of trays, no idle gossip across concrete walls. Just a heavy silence that crept like a fog through the cell blocks of Fulton Correctional Facility. And by 6:45 a.m., that silence would be pierced by a scream that would echo far beyond the prison gates. Larissa Vaughn was found dead in her cell. Cell 214, solitary wing. She was sprawled on the cold cement floor, facing the corner as if she had simply decided to lie down and never wake up again. Her hands were curled into soft fists, her body unnaturally still, the air around her thick with something unspoken, something wrong. Officer Kendra Lowe was the first to see her. She'd been doing routine rounds, a clipboard in one hand, coffee in the other, when she noticed that Vaughn hadn't touched her breakfast tray. It was unlike her. Larissa was always up early, always alert. Even when she had no one to talk to, she didn't sleep through anything. Lowe called her name. No answer. Called again, louder. Still nothing. The door was open moments later. The medical staff rushed in, but it was already too late. There were no signs of a struggle, no bruises or visible trauma, just a body gone cold. Time of death was estimated at around 3:15 a.m. Official cause, pending toxicology. Unofficial cause? That was another matter. Rumors spread fast in Fulton, and this one spread like wildfire. Larissa didn't just drop dead. One inmate whispered to another. She was silenced. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Just days earlier, the Department of Corrections had begun an internal investigation after it was revealed that Larissa had infected 6 correctional officers with HIV. A scandal, an embarrassment, a dangerous secret clawing its way toward daylight. And then she died. In her sleep? Nobody believed that. She had enemies, said Marlena Ross, another inmate housed 2 cells away. But not the kind wearing orange. The kind who wore uniforms and badges. Larissa had become a liability. That's what everyone said. She had names. She kept lists. She hinted at bigger corruption. An entire network of abuse, cover-ups, and smuggled contraband. She once bragged she could bring down the entire dam system if she lived long enough to tell it. She didn't. The surveillance footage from outside her cell mysteriously glitched from 2:59 a.m. to 3:24 a.m., 25 minutes of total blackout. When questioned, the prison IT department blamed a power surge. No one believed that either. Then came the missing report. Larissa had handwritten a 6-page affidavit just hours before her death, naming 2 officers she claimed had raped her and several others she accused of smuggling medication, and threatening to expose her if she didn't stay quiet. That document was never logged into evidence. Gone. Vanished. Even stranger, the external hard drive confiscated from her cell, containing over 40 hours of secretly recorded conversations with guards, was reported corrupted and unreadable. 2 pieces of evidence. Both gone. Both conveniently erased the day she died. Inside the prison, the tension was suffocating. Some inmates refused food for 3 days in protest. Others whispered prayers for her soul, drawing her initials in toothpaste on the walls. LV-214. Officer Lowe, the same guard who found her, was placed on administrative leave for emotional exhaustion. She never returned to work. Outside the prison, the media lost interest within a week. A few local stations ran quick segments about the controversial inmate who died under mysterious circumstances. But no one pushed harder. No one demanded real answers. Except her mother, Loretta Vaughn. She didn't buy the official story, not for a second. "My daughter was a fighter," she told reporters while clutching a faded photo of Larissa in her graduation gown. She wasn't suicidal. She was preparing a legal battle. She had evidence. She wanted justice. Loretta hired a private investigator, Marvin DeSoto, who later revealed in a leaked memo that Larissa had reached out to him 2 days before her death, requesting a private meeting. They were supposed to speak the morning after she died. "She told me she had something explosive," DeSoto wrote. "She said if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be natural." The autopsy finally came back. No blunt force trauma, no organ failure, no drugs, except one: traces of sodium azide, a highly toxic chemical used in car airbags, explosives, and sometimes, in laboratories, as a suicide agent. But sodium azide doesn't appear in a prison's medical inventory, nor in its kitchen, nor in its janitorial supplies. So, how did it get into her bloodstream? That question was never answered. The warden declined all interviews. The guard were silenced with legal threats and non-disclosure agreements. Larissa's funeral was closed casket. Her mother was given only a brief 5-minute viewing window, during which she claimed her daughter's lips looked darker than normal, almost like she'd been choked, she said. Whether she was poisoned, suffocated, or simply frightened into a heart attack, no one could say for sure. But Cell 214 became infamous. They never reassigned it, never cleaned it, and never spoke of it again. Inmates swore they heard things, saw footsteps, a woman humming. Some claimed they saw her shadow pacing at night through the slit in the door. "She didn't leave," one inmate said. "She just waits now, waits for the truth." And maybe, somewhere in that gray concrete tomb, her truth still lingers. Unseen, unheard, but not forgotten. By the time Larissa Vaughn's body was wheeled out of Fulton Correctional, the real machinery had already begun. Not the coroner's van, not the press van circling like blood-scented hounds, but the machine behind the curtain. The quiet, deliberate engine of institutional cover-up. The prison issued its first statement just before noon. Inmate Larissa Vaughn was found unresponsive in her cell. At approximately 6:45 a.m., emergency services were contacted immediately. No foul play is suspected at this time. It was a word suspected that struck people first. Not ruled out, not denied, just not suspected. A carefully crafted phrase. Larissa's death wasn't just inconvenient. It was radioactive. Within 2 hours of her being declared dead, the Internal Affairs Unit had arrived, not to investigate a homicide, but to review officer conduct for protocol compliance. Within 4 hours, the external hard drive from her cell was deemed corrupted and discarded. Surveillance footage from the corridor, where cameras had mysteriously blacked out, was replaced with blank timestamps. No backups, no recovery efforts, nothing. At 6 p.m., a cleanup crew scrubbed Cell 214. By 6:15, the evidence was gone. The SD card found under her mattress disappeared. The printed list of names she claimed could destroy careers? Nowhere to be found. The confidential complaint she'd filed against Officer Damon Slate, one of the 6 guards infected, was marked unsubstantiated and removed from her file. By midnight, Larissa Vaughn was legally reduced to a statistic. Female, 29. African American, HIV positive. Deceased. Just another number in the system. But the system had miscalculated one thing. Larissa hadn't told just one person. She'd told 7. 7 inmates. 7 stories. 7 scattered pieces of a larger truth. And one of them, Marlena Ross, refused to stay silent. In a handwritten letter smuggled out through a prison ministry volunteer, Marlena wrote, she said if anything happened to her, the guards wouldn't be the ones to clean it up. She said there were people above them. People who didn't wear uniforms but suits. People scared of what she knew. The letter was addressed to Loretta Vaughn, Larissa's mother, and it lit a fire she couldn't put out. Loretta went back to the press. But the second time, no one was listening. The headlines had moved on. The public had lost interest. The scandal had cooled into a cautionary tale. And the institutions Larissa had threatened, they had doubled down. 3 of the 6 infected guards filed for medical discharge and disappeared. Officer Kendra Lowe, who found Larissa's body, never returned to duty. Damon Slate, transferred. No press release. No hearings. Just reassigned to another facility in Alabama. Whispers spread through Fulton. They tied up every loose end. Everyone except Marlena Ross. And Marlena had copies. 2 days after Loretta went to the media, she received a small brown envelope in the mail. No return address. No note. Just a flash drive and a list of names. 22 in total. Guards, nurses, even a chaplain. The drive contained audio files. Crackly, sometimes garbled, but chilling. You infect anyone else, and I swear. You think I don't know who's moving the meds? They'll kill you if you talk, Larissa. It was enough to spark something bigger. Loretta contacted Marvin DeSoto. The same private investigator Larissa had reached out to before her death. He went straight to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The GBI opened a quiet inquiry. But Fulton Prison knew, and they were watching. Within days, Marlena was placed in disciplinary lockdown. She wasn't caught fighting, didn't fail a drug test. She just vanished. No visitors, no mail. Her bunkmate was reassigned. Her cell was emptied. When Loretta called, she was told Marlena had been moved for her own safety. But if Larissa Vaughn taught anyone anything, it's this. Silence is never safe. Not in Fulton. Not in Georgia. Not anywhere someone like her dares to speak the truth. The clock is still ticking. And the truth, still bleeding through the cracks. If you think Larissa Vaughn's story ends in cell 214, think again. The cover-up runs deeper, and the silence is deafening. Help us expose the truth the system tried to bury. Backhand index pointing right like. Comment your thoughts, and hit subscribe for more real stories they don't want you to hear. Movie camera, because on the Family Crime Exposed, every secret has a voice. And we're just getting started.